Okay, today I know it's a little early because it's nowhere near Halloween, but today we're going to be talking about avoiding tropes in scary/horror story writing. Now, even if you're not writing horror, these things can be good to know purely because there are lots of scary story contests out there. The library has one. There are dozens and dozens out there. Every time you go to around Halloween time, you can just Google scary story contest, and there's about a million. So this is good to know, and it's also good to know because these are great principles to know for thriller and suspense as well. Some of these are horror/scary story specific, but some of them are just in general thriller/scary stuff specific. Now, when I say trope, I want to define a trope real quick, just to be sure that everyone's on the same page, video, etc. A trope is not necessarily a bad thing. The reason I say avoiding tropes is purely because of the fact that most of the time they're considered a trope because they've been done so many times that they're starting to be done badly. They're starting to be like, oh, well, it has this trope, so you'll like it, rather than actually doing good writing. So when I say avoiding tropes, I don't necessarily mean you have to avoid these tropes. I'm going to talk more about how to avoid being the epitome of tropey. And when I say tropey, I mean it's not unique. It's not original. It's just the same old story being retold in slightly different wording. And that's okay. I mean, there's lots of different tropes that people adore and love. I know that a lot of people love with romance the enemies to lovers trope, but that can be done originally. It can be done uniquely. There's a lot of people who love the chosen one trope in fantasy. Again, something that can be made very original, or it can be very cliche and tropey. Now, cliche is slightly different. Cliche is where it's been done badly in a, feels forced sense, whereas the trope is it's part of the story, but it's not done well. So they're similar, but not quite the same. Anyway, I also wanted to give an update. If you're going to enter the March story contest, whether you're a teen or whether you're an adult watching this video, because some of the adults watch the teen videos, the entries are due for that short story contest this Saturday by 5:45 p.m. sharp. I am cutting it off at 5:45 purely because of the fact that there have been too many times where people come banging on the doors and go, help, the library's closed. And I'm like, well, yeah, it's closed. So 5:45 is 15 minutes before we close, so you're guaranteed to get it in on time. My coworkers will not be taking any more after 5:45 unless you specifically call me and tell me, hey, we're not going to be able to get it in on time, or to call and tell one of my coworkers and say, hey, can I turn this in at 5:55? Just make sure you let them know ahead of time, because they have been explicitly told by me to do 5:45 sharp. Anyway, so please get those stories in. I'm very excited to do another contest, and the more people that I have enter the contest, the more cool prizes I can get. Currently, my budget is limited because I've only had a maximum amount of 11 participants, which is phenomenal and great, and I love it. But the more participants we get, the more cool the prizes will get. So, if that motivates you at all and you are one of the people participating, see if you can get your friends to participate, because the more people I have, the more cool stuff I can get for those who win. And even those who lose, because honestly, these contests are not about winning and losing. Yes, do I have extra cool prizes for those who win? Absolutely. But it's not about that. It's about learning and improving through practice. As a result, I also give participation awards. So you will get an award from this contest no matter what. You will also get feedback on your story no matter what from this contest. No matter how big it gets, I plan on finding a way to give everyone feedback, because this is about improving your writing, not about, it's not about winning and losing, it's about improving your writing and practicing. The prizes are just an extra fun little bonus. Alright, that being said, let's dive right into scary and horror story tropes. So, we're first going to address the cabin in the woods trope. Yes, you're probably very familiar with this one. The second you're watching a horror film and they're driving into the mountains, you're going, oh no, they're going to a scary cabin in the woods. And it's like, cabins in the woods aren't that scary, but what's scary about it, and the reason why a lot of people write using cabins in the woods for scary story and horror story contests, is because of the fact that they are all alone. They are often away from cell phone service, so it's a harder way to get a hold of help. It is a lot easier to predict that there's monsters out there because there's a whole bunch of nothing in between them and urban city, right? So as a result of that, cabin in the woods can be used very well. Like I said, all of these are very beneficial. When it comes to the scary story genre, having unknown territory, great one. Having them be alone and far away from help, great one. Having them be unsure where they are and of their surroundings, and so that makes it 10 times scarier, great one. These are all great components, and that's why the cabin in the woods is used as a trope. However, the problem is that the cabin in the woods has just become kind of a, like I said, a trope, a cliche, where people have started writing it badly. The way that the cabin in the woods has been written badly is primarily where they're going to the cabin, but they don't even explain why. Tell us why. Is it a family trip? Is this a girls' night out with friends? Is this a bachelor party? Like, tell us why they're out in the woods alone. Don't just be like, they're out in the woods alone setting. That doesn't give us character depth. That doesn't give us intrigue. That doesn't give us motivation to want to follow these characters at all. I would also recommend you can switch it up with the cabin in the woods. You could do a resort that's far off in the mountains or different things like that. Honestly, change up the setting a little bit. You don't have to do a cabin. You can do a cabin in the woods type feel for the trope and still not have it be necessarily a cabin in the woods. You can do all sorts of things with this particular idea and take it in a very unique and original way. I'd highly recommend, if you're doing this trope, to look at a bunch of people who have done it well versus people who have done it in a very cheesy way, and then see what you can avoid. Another thing that is important to avoid with the cabin in the woods trope is a lot of people tend to make it so that there's a bunch of random stuff in the house that people don't know about. That is a good way to do it, but make sure that it's original. It's not just like a bloody knife because it's clearly haunted. Okay, well that's in every scary house. You know, let's try to take it an original twist. This is all about taking original twists on something that has become cheesy. You can take something that's considered cheesy and make it original and unique. All right. Next one we're going to talk about is serial killer plot. Now this one is very fascinating because obviously this unfortunately happens in real life. However, the reason that it is fascinating and that so many people like to write about it is because it gives them an excuse to make the villain flat. And that is not okay. Your serial killer in your story, if you're doing a scary or horror story, should be fascinating. They should be interesting. They should have a backstory of their own that makes you go, whoa, that's kind of crazy. They should have a reason for killing people. They shouldn't just be like, oh, well, they're a serial killer, therefore they kill people. It's become cheesy because far too many people are just like, they just kill people because they do. And yeah, sometimes the main characters wouldn't know why they kill people. But that doesn't mean that you can't have an elaborate backstory that you hint at, or that you give us clues to, or that you make us theorize about. You know, even if you don't bluntly tell us this is the serial killer's backstory, I actually wouldn't recommend you do that. I would recommend you hint at it, because if you just say this is a serial killer and he kills people, that's boring. No one cares about your villain anymore. They're just like, oh, he just stabs people. That's why some horror movies that do this trope aren't that scary, because of the fact that you're like, so there's just a guy who kills people because he wants to. Theoretically, that's possible, but generally, even serial killers have their motives. However twisted and demented they are, they still have their motives. They may not make sense logically, but they're still there. All right, next. Halloween. Very classic trope with scary stories and horror stories. Sorry, hiccups. Trying to stop hiccuping. With Halloween, the trick is, again, making it unique. So many people are like, oh, hey, there's this creepy thing that happens only on Halloween. Okay, well, what is the creepy thing? Give us more detail. Why does it only happen on Halloween? Don't just tell me it's because it's Halloween. Why specifically Halloween? You know, you gotta have reasons behind setting it on Halloween, aside from just Halloween. I love Halloween. Halloween's a fantastic holiday. I love the concept of spirits roaming around at night. All for that. But you gotta give me reasons. You gotta have a good, solid foundation other than just Halloween. That's the equivalent of a teacher coming up to you and saying, okay, what do you want to be when you grow up? And you just say, something. It's like, that's vague. Not helpful. You need to know why it's set on Halloween. You need to know how the magic works if there's magic involved. You need to make sure that if there's some sort of murder, why did they murder the person on Halloween specifically? Or was there not a reason for it being Halloween? It just happened to happen that way. Lots of curiosity that you can put in there. All right. Next. Conjuring Evil of any sort. This is, again, a very prominent one in scary stories and in horror stories. Lots of conjuring evil spirits, conjuring evil creatures, conjuring evil demons, conjuring evil person from the dead. Evil fill in the blank. I guess we should do evil blank. In general, if you're going to be conjuring anything, you got to explain it more than just the classic. We have seen far too many innocent teens do it for fun because they found a Ouija board in their closet. I'm sorry, that's become cliche, that's become cheesy because of the fact that not all teens do that, A. A lot of teens are actually far smarter than that, B. And C, a lot of people don't even know if that stuff works. So as a result of all those compounding factors, don't just have them pull out a Ouija board or try to predict the future and get possessed or whatever. That's become a cheesy trope. However, if you want to do the Conjuring Evil trope, you can. Just give them a reason. Maybe they want revenge. Maybe this particular person really, really misses this particular villain because they thought they were a good person before they found out they were an evil person. Or maybe they're conjuring this evil spirit because they have been horribly bullied and they want to bully their bullies back. And the only way they feel they can get power is conjuring an evil spirit. Now, all of these, again, are not necessarily good reasons, but they're logical reasons in the person's head. Even if you're like, that's not logical, the person could see it as logical, right? And that's what matters, is that the character can see it as logical, irregardless of whether it is or isn't logical. So if you're going to do Conjuring Evil, have a reason, and then explain how they conjure them in a way that makes more sense. You don't have to go into crazy detail. Don't go researching how to conjure evil spirits. Don't do that. But you can definitely make up your own magic system. You can make up your own ideas. You can make up your own concepts. I know that one of my favorite ones with Conjuring Evil stuff recently was the Hocus Pocus 2 that came out a couple years ago. I loved that. The reason why is because they did it on accident. They were just doing a little fun Halloween thing of lighting candles and pretending to summon things for fun because they thought that it was funny. That makes sense. And then it happened on accident because the guy sold them a candle that actually worked. And so as a result, that made sense, right? Like, no one would voluntarily summon these people. Not at all. But having it be a total accident that they didn't even know about, I loved that. I loved that idea. Similarly in the first one. The first one where it's kind of like no one believes in it, everyone thinks it's a hoax, and so he's like, he's kind of like daring himself to light the candle. That makes sense. Teenagers will do lots of stuff for dares. That makes sense. Like I said, it may not always be logical, but it has a good solid reason behind it, more than just creepy random stuff at a birthday party. Anyway, alright, let's move on to the next thing. Alright. Alone in the house. Now, of course, this is the trope that makes everyone jump and jitter in the night when they hear a dish fall. I had that happen last night where I finished washing the dishes. I'd stacked them all up nicely and they all rearranged at about 2 a.m. and I went, you know, I jumped and I was like, oh, I didn't like that. That wasn't fun. But it's become a cheesy trope, this alone in the house thing, purely because of the fact that it happens so often. And it happens so frequently. Can you do it originally, though? Absolutely. You can absolutely have it be like, hey, they're alone in the house because they have a cold and they don't want to go out and see their friends. Or, hey, they're alone in the house because their parents are away on a trip and they just finished throwing an absolutely banger party, and so they're alone cleaning up the party when they get attacked. You know, you gotta have a reason, though. Most people don't like being in their house alone without a reason. Now, there are some people who like being in their house alone because they're introverted, or alternatively don't like being alone but have other reasons why they're alone. But you gotta explain, why are they alone? Not just they are alone and they get murdered. Again, this is all about explaining characters, explaining them so they're not just flat. They have depth, they have reasoning, they make sense. All right. Next one. The bad guy just won't die. This is again a very common one in horror/scary stories where it's like they try to kill him or they try to get rid of the scary thing, whatever the scary thing is, whether it's a robot or a person or a witch or ghost. And for whatever reason, they just can't get rid of it. They just won't die. They just won't stay gone. I would definitely say this needs, again, to have a reason. The main problem with a lot of horror and scary story tropes is they're just like, what if he just lived? And it's like, well, why, though? How, though? When did this happen? Why did the knife to the gut successfully not kill him? You know? Like, yes, the idea of an impending evil that is forever living and can't be killed is fascinating in a horror/scary story setting, and quite terrifying. However, you gotta make sense of it. Okay, if you're doing a realistic horror story where there's not magic involved or science involved, then you gotta have it be so, there's an explanation, like, they thought he was dead because they clonked him over the head, but he was just unconscious, you know. Or you gotta have another reason, or if you're doing a science one, you gotta have a sciencey explanation. Like, he is part robot and they stabbed him in the only place where he has robotic parts. Or if you're doing a fantasy horror, then you gotta have something like there was some sort of enchantment on those grounds that made it so every time he died in this area, he would come back. So you gotta kill him outside of that area. But then you gotta have these ideas. Yes, the characters may or may not know about these things, but again, you should foreshadow these things. Or at very least have the characters theorize these things. Because let's be honest, if you were being chased by a psychopath and then all of a sudden you had some downtime to plan how you were going to kill the psychopath, wouldn't you theorize about what may or may not kill it? So you can always throw theories out there and then have it be like, oh, maybe her theory is right, maybe her theory is accurate. You know, that's very fascinating and can lead to a lot of very intriguing things. And a lot of good writing is done that way. So, if you're going to have your villain be unkillable, at least have a reason. Don't just make him unkillable because you want to keep writing books. Or movies, in the case of most slasher films. Alright, next one. The classic split up. You know, you have the group of 4 and they all go, we should split up. That way he can't attack us all at once. Well, yeah, but now you also don't have power in numbers, stupid. Sorry, but sometimes I watch those horror movies and I'm like, Anyway, so if you're going to do the classic split up, you've got to have a reason why. A great example of this was, I was watching a show, can't remember which show because I watch way too many, but the whole idea was that they ended up getting split up on accident because of the fact that she had seen an illusion. And when she'd seen the illusion, she walked down a different hallway, and this house is ever shifting and ever changing, so that hallway no longer exists. So that's how they got split up. It wasn't intentional, it was just, oh, I'm gonna go left, and he went to go left and ran right into a wall. And they got split up. So you gotta have either a magical or scientific explanation, or you gotta have just plain, you gotta say that they're stupid. You gotta admit that they're stupid. They can't pretend that it's smart, because it's not. Or if they are pretending that they're smart and they're like, we are gonna split up because that's the smart thing to do, you gotta have someone call them out on it. You gotta do what's called hanging a lantern on it. I think I've discussed this before, but just in case you haven't seen the previous videos, hanging a lantern on it is when you acknowledge a concept in a blunt way, so that way the reader's like, okay, you at least admitted that what they're doing is stupid. So for example, if someone's like, we should split up so that way he can't get us as easily, and someone says, we should split up, you do realize that we have 4 against 1 currently, and if we split up, it's 1 against 1? And then the other guy's like, whatever, you're dumb. Like, at least you've acknowledged it now. You've acknowledged that the guy is dumb and that what he's suggesting is dumb, irregardless of whether they do it or not. But if you decide to do the split up trope and they all get split up, explain why they get split up, explain how they get split up. I watched a thriller recently. The ending was terrible, but the rest of it was well written. And the reason they got split up was because of the fact that they had to survive the night in this house. It was a science fiction movie. And if they survived the night in this AI house, then they would win a prize, $1 million prize. And as a result of that, they wanted to split up because they didn't want to share the prize with anyone. That makes a lot of sense, you know? So there are ways that you can encourage the splitting up trope and have it make logical sense. All right. Alright, abandoned/haunted places. Generally it's abandoned/haunted house, but, can be, crematorium, can be, sanatorium, can be hospital, can be library, can be fill in the blank with haunted and abandoned in the beginning. Haunted and abandoned, etc. The reason this is a good one is because, as I said, it has a lot of benefits. All of these things have benefits. I'm not saying they don't. But you gotta explain what's going on here. Having it be abandoned definitely is creepy. Definitely leaves you with less resources, which can be even creepier when you're dealing with a villain or a scary person, because you're like, I want knives, I want weapons. Well, you ain't got that because you're in an abandoned house. Or alternatively, a haunted house. That's already scary because the idea that someone has died there or the idea that a spirit is residing there is definitely very creepy, right? The idea behind this definitely gives you chills, even if you don't believe in that kind of stuff. The second you hear a door slam because wind brushed up against it, you're gonna go, ah, scary, even if you don't believe in it. Unless you're like, really stalwart, don't believe in it. I've watched a couple things where they're just like, meh. And I'm like, you have guts. Because I would be scared. With an abandoned/haunted place, you have to explain why they go in there. Yes, there's the classic, I dare you to spend a night there. True. But it's gotten a little old. It's gotten a little cheesy. Give us new reasons. Do they end up having to spend the night here because they are stranded and their car broke down? Do they have to spend the night here because they have no other choice for whatever reason? They walked out in the middle of nowhere and now they don't know where they are and they're waiting till morning to figure out where they are. Are they spending this time at an abandoned/haunted place because they're supposed to? Are they like a construction worker and they're supposed to go in and say, hey, is this building, prepped for explosiveness in the morning? There's all sorts of different ideas you can come up with. There are reasons people go into abandoned/haunted places that aren't just, I dare you to stay in there. Now, is that the most classic reason? Yes. But that's also why it's become the most cheesy trope. Next one is Science Gone Wrong. This one is, again, a very classic one, where in general, with scary and horror stories, if science goes wrong, that is something that we're all terrified of, right? The idea that someone's going to pop out at us, or that AI is going to take over the world, or that we're going to create some sort of crazy virus that creates zombies. There's a list of things this category falls under. However, with the Science Gone Wrong trope, it's important to acknowledge it can be done well. It absolutely can be very interesting and compelling.
Ender's Game!
Exactly. There's all sorts of different ways the science can go wrong and be very thrilling, be very scary, be very horrific. However, you gotta make sure that you explain it. There are far too many ones where it's just like, we don't know how science went wrong, but it did. And it's like, tell me why though. Like, at least give me a theory.
Unless the big reveal is like why it went wrong.
Right,
but
exactly.
then also do it well. You gotta
yes,
put effort into it.
You gotta put effort into it. You gotta foreshadow. You gotta give me theories up until that point. Because if you have random theories, that's definitely very interesting and very intriguing and keeps the reader going until the real theory is revealed or until the current theory is confirmed.
Yeah.
Whichever it is. With science going wrong, you gotta make sure that you check all the boxes. The foreshadowing of, breakthroughs of the ideas of your scientific world, especially if you're doing a science fiction novel. In this case, you're going to want to probably do a lot of research regarding science and what's going on now. Because yes, there are already scary things in science.
Fire.
Fire, that's fair.
Genetic mutations.
Genetic mutations. There's also AI, obviously. And yes, everyone's not scared of AI currently.
But you should be.
But that doesn't mean that it can't learn. It's literally learning as we speak. And on top of that, with AI, there have been AIs that have been built that have become incredibly intelligent. I believe it was Google, could be wrong though, don't quote me on that, that about 10 years ago, they built 2 AIs and taught them to talk to each other so that they could learn from each other.
Oh gosh.
Within 10 minutes, they'd invented their own language and they couldn't understand them anymore. And they were like, oh no, this is bad. And so they immediately shut that down, thank goodness. But that's a great example of science going wrong, where people are like, this is a great idea, now it can learn faster.
No,
yeah,
it's not.
It can learn faster, hence the issue. So, in general, it can be a really well-used trope. Just make sure that you do it well.
I love the idea too that goofy little computers. When you're you and your best friend are in second grade and here we're gonna make a new language.
Exactly.
Just that with a computer.
That but with computers and you're so wait.
Oh my gosh, that just cracks me up.
Alright. The next trope that is very common and unfortunately is not very accurate, that's part of the reason why it happens, is adults are useless. You go into the main character goes and tells them, there's a big fat scary monster in the woods, and they're all like, you're just crazy. I understand that can be realistic to a degree, but you gotta make sure that there's a reason they wouldn't believe their kid.
Yeah, right?
Because most parents, I would say, believe their kid. If this is one of those kids that's constantly pranking someone or constantly, pulling their parents' legs and being like, I, ran away from this scary guy.
I'm too sick to go to school.
Yeah, or I'm too sick to go to school. And, one of those kids, sure, then the adults might be useless because they don't believe them, right? Because they're a constant liar. However, if they're not a constant liar, generally adults like to believe their children.
Yeah, right?
So if you're going to make them useless, at least make them useless in a way that makes sense. For example, the kid comes up and says, hey, there's a big scary monster chasing me. And they say, what? Is it a bear? Is it a cougar? Realistic explanations, but still. And they're like, I don't know what it is, but it's chasing me. And they go into the woods with their shotgun to try and find the monster because they're worried that it's near their house, and then they get eaten. That makes them useless, but in a way that they at least tried.
Yeah, at least they tried. They gave it a good shot.
They gave it a good shot. I understand the reason people do this, because of the fact that they want adults to be useless, because then the kids can either overcome, or then it's 10 times scarier because not even adults are useful in this situation, That's supposed to be scarier, and it kind of is. Because generally, we look up to our parents to know more stuff than we do.
The adults are the ones in charge.
Right.
And
so if the ones in charge are even having trouble with this thing, that makes it more scary. However, that doesn't mean that you should just make them blobs. That do nothing.
Parents are not blobs. They very much like to be in your life.
Exactly.
That's your advantage.
Yes, and so you should use that to your advantage in the story and make them useless in ways that make sense. Like I said, they get eaten by said monster, or they go to try and attack said monster and get terribly injured, and so as a result, it's not that they're useless, but it's that they're unable to function now.
Yeah.
Or alternatively, you could have it that their adults aren't home. Then in that case, they're useless just because they aren't there. It's not even that they are useless as people, but rather that they are useless because there's no way to contact them for whatever reason. Maybe they're on a trip. Maybe you're in the middle of a camping trip and the adults had all gone to grab stuff from the trailer, and so you're by yourself. There's lots of ways that you can do this trope without making it problematic. All right. The last one that I want to talk about is the unknown monster. This is a fantastic trope because the unknown is one of the scariest things in the world, especially when it's a big fat creature. Because generally we don't like getting eaten in general, but we definitely don't like getting eaten by something that we don't know anything about. When I say unknown monster,
by like a bear versus this green oozing multi-eyed creature.
Right.
I choose the bear.
Exactly, because you know more about the bear.
Yeah.
Whereas the other one, you have no idea. So with the unknown monster, it can even be a small thing. I know I watched a X-Files episode that was terrifying to me because the whole idea was that these guys had been cutting down a bunch of trees that they weren't supposed to illegally, and as a result, they had cut down a couple of really, really old trees that had eggs in them, tiny little eggs of a carnivorous ancient bug. And as a result, they were just completely dying. The only thing that the bugs would stay away from was the light. And of course, because they're in the middle of nowhere, their generators are running low. That's scary. You're like, I'm gonna get eaten alive by these carnivorous bugs. Like, that's terrifying. But because it's unknown, they didn't know anything about it aside from scared from light and will eat me.
Yeah.
So as a result of that, having an unknown monster or an unknown entity can be very scary. That's not the problem. The issue here is the fact that far too many people leave it too much unknown, and therefore it becomes almost cheesy because of the fact that they never show you anything about the monster. They'll just do like heavy breathing and paw prints, and you're like, oh, scary.
That's literally everything.
Exactly, that could be anything. Now, if you say something
my
like
older brother waking up
and wearing bare feet,
yeah, right?
Like, honestly, exactly. So with the unknown monster, you got to make sure if it is unknown, you got to identify it at least a little bit. Like I said, make it a bug, make it a prehistoric animal that no one has seen in a while. Make it an alien. Give it a couple details. It has large fangs, or it has huge hooves, or it has bright red eyes, but you can't see anything else. Those kinds of details where you have just small details, but you don't give all the details, is what makes this so interesting. Or if you do give a lot of details, like in the X-Files episode, make sure that you don't give all of the details. Like I said, carnivorous, scared of light. Those are only 2 details you know about this bug. That's it. Anything else, how to kill them, how to stop them, where they came from, was all unknown until the end of the episode. As a result, it made it far more scary. So if you're going to do the unknown monster trope, just make sure that you cover all your bases with having, I'd say, at least 3 details that are known about the monster. You don't necessarily have to do a ton of detail work, because that makes it no longer scary because you know what it is. But if you do it, like you said, it has multiple eyes, it's oozing, it's green. Those are 3 details that make it very vague, but still just distinct enough that we're like, so that was a great example. I'd say 3 details is the minimum you need, possibly 2 if they're bigger details.
And if you're stumped for ideas, search up like random adjective generator, and there you go.
This is true. random scary adjectives.
Yeah.
Sharp, pointy teeth, claws. These are all great. We could make a whole list if we wanted to of random adjectives that are scary and could be used in scary ways. Heck, even ones that don't seem scary can be scary. For example, like the reason that Stephen King's It was so scary was because of the fact that he was a clown, but no one really knew he was a clown at first. So as a result of that, it was just kind of like, you'd see a red balloon floating down an alleyway. That's not weird. All these details that you're like, that's fishy. So that being said, in general, if you want to write scary stories or want to write horror, try to read scary stories in horror, but that doesn't mean you can't be good at it anyway. I don't read a lot of scary stories. I don't read a lot of horror. I do watch some semi-scary stuff, but it's more like crime dramas, or science fiction crime dramas in the case of X-Files. But the reason I'm still able to write that kind of stuff is because I've done a lot of studying about how to write it and how it works. So I'd say either read the stuff or do some research solidly on what works and what doesn't work. I would say with all of these tropes, don't necessarily avoid them, but avoid doing them in the cheesy ways that we discussed. Just going to reiterate real quick for those that didn't hear it at the beginning of the video or that skipped it. The March contest is due on Saturday. So if you're interested in entering in the March contest, it's due on Saturday. The minimum is 1,500 words. However, the maximum is 6,000 words. So you got a lot of room. I will say if it is less than 1,500, we will actually dock points for that purely because of the fact that we did request it. And yes, we can tell. As an editor, I know about how many pages 1,500 words takes up, and well, some people think I don't know, but I do. Anyway, long story short though, I would really love to see more people enter in the March contest purely because I'm hoping to do one every single month if I get enough entries. So I just
many
need
things to do this weekend.
No, that's fair. That's fair. I just mean in general, like if you're considering it, think about it. Anyway, I will turn off the video now.